Today we're holding a session on understanding brain injury and the National Assistance Card for National Brain Injury Awareness Week. Please note, you will have already noticed when you signed in that the event will be recorded. However, no attendees will be identified in the recording, as all attendees' videos will be turned off automatically during the webinar. This event will be captioned by an access caption stenographer, and you can turn captions on or off in your Zoom settings, or click on the link in the chat to view captions in your browser. Please use Zoom's Q&A feature to ask questions during the webinar, and we'll answer as many questions as we can in the final 15 minutes. If we don't get to your question, don't worry. We'll have a follow-up email where we'll address any unanswered questions. Now, we'd like to make an acknowledgement of country. I'm aware that you're Zooming in from all over the country, but the Brain Injury Association of Tasmania and the National Assistance Card recognise and value diversity in all its forms and believes everyone should be treated with respect, dignity and equality. We pay respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their elders past and present. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we live and recognise their continued connection to the land, skies and waterways. We acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and this land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Now let me introduce our speakers today. We have three speakers who are up here with me. The first we'll have is Lex Bull, who's the Rehabilitation Coordinator at the Royal Hobart Hospital, and he has 15 years experience in the neurosurgical space in a variety of different roles. He'll be taking care of the understanding brain injury component of this session. Then we have next to him Rosie, the National Assistance Card Program Manager, and she's here to speak with you about the National Assistance Card. And then last but certainly not least, next to me here is Paul Pritchard, a National Assistance Card Ambassador, who'll be sharing his experience with the card. And we'll be finishing the session, like I said, with a Q&A session. So let's get started, and I'd like to welcome Lex Bull.
Thanks very much. G'day, I'm Lex. I'm a rehab coordinator, but actually that means I'm a registered nurse. And my bio must be a little long in the tooth because I'm up to 28 years now working in the neurosurg and rehab spaces. I took my first job in neurosurg in 1997, which ironically is the same year that BIAT started, and we've kind of overlapped and intertwined over the duration of my professional career, and it's always a real pleasure to be asked to come and speak here. And as a member of the Committee of Management, I'm incredibly proud of the journey that BIAT's been on over that time and the great work that they're doing at the moment and that they've done in the past. So they've got a great team and they're doing some wonderful work. It's 28 years, and I think the irony of that is that the more I learn, the more I feel like a beginner in brain injury. You know, the more I realise I don't know. I think the one important lesson I've learnt over that time is that every brain injury is deeply personal and utterly unique in the way that they present. And whilst I've spent so much time trying to understand the brain's function and trying to understand best practice therapies for recovery, the value in the lessons I've received have come mostly from those with lived experience, from their families and from their loved ones. So whilst I'm going to talk about definitions and classifications and those kinds of parts of brain injury, the take-home message from me is that in nearly 30 years, I've never seen two injuries that are the same. Every brain injury needs to be treated differently, and everyone's experience of it varies from another person. Have we got a clicker there? No. Do you mind if I drive? So when we talk about what a brain injury is, essentially a brain injury describes any damage to the brain that causes an alteration in function Usually that's described after birth, but with increasing definitions that include things like fetal alcohol syndrome, etc. You know, that's starting to include definitions during the development of the brain as well. Beyond that definition, we tend to break brain injury down into two different classifications. We think of one as traumatic brain injury, and traumatic brain injury really is defined by any injury that's caused by external factors. So thinking about falls or assaults or motor vehicle accidents. And then the other classification would be acquired brain injury. And that loosely describes any injury that's internally driven. So commonly things like strokes or tumours or infections. The other definitions, the other big bracket to include is around degenerative brain disorders as well. I think I've gone too far. So we've got a little bit of data here from some national data. I think it's important to note in the traumatic brain injury space, which is the data we've got up here, Australians experience around about 200,000 traumatic brain injuries a year. And it's hard to get a finger on the pulse of exactly how many, because we know that they're massively underreported. Particularly within that 200,000, we know that mild traumatic brain injury or concussion, and the two terms are often used interchangeably, make up around 80% of that 200,000. And of course, they are often the patients that don't make it to medical treatment and don't self-report. So hence why we think those numbers are massively underrepresented. You can see that we have by far and away the largest slice of the pie that comes from falls. From a medical point of view, I think one of our challenges in the hospital is that this category of patient often is an older patient who presents post-fall, and often because of their age and because of their other comorbidities, the brain injury is overlooked. I think that's a challenge for us to work on in the hospital. And then looking at transport and assaults, and then other injuries like sports injuries and the like. Some mild brain injury was my passion for a long time, and another one of our challenges is that we know the majority of the science around treatment modalities for mild traumatic brain injury come out of the sports world, but it is unfair to compare treatment of sports injury to treatment from assault or treatment from fall. And I think we've got a lot of work to do in understanding the difference in how those conditions present. That's work to come. I also want to acknowledge probably what I consider to be the most underreported mild traumatic brain injury that fits within that 12% of assaults, and that is the domestic violence component of mild traumatic brain injury. And I think we have done an appalling job in my lifespan of acknowledging that group of people and working to support them and to shine a light on how we can better recognise and help those patients. And I hope by the time I finish, we've done a lot more to move forward in that space. We also, so this is national data, we did do a big study locally. This is in the Royal Hobart Hospital. Colleagues of mine, Dr. Mark Slatcher and Clive Skilbeck, and we looked essentially at every patient that came through the Royal Hobart Hospital over a period of around 18 months. And I can tell you that what we see in the Royal Hobart is slightly different from the representations that we see nationally. We know that transport injuries were a bigger slice of the pie than falls, and somewhat disturbingly, assaults were nearly as big as transport crashes. So far more assaults, far more motor vehicle accidents. So looking at now, and I haven't got a breakdown of numbers here on acquired brain injury, but we talked about acquired brain injury being from internal causes. Typically in the hospital, we'll see people present with post-strokes. They'll present with meningitis or a brain infection or a brain tumour, and there are other causes that you can see there. The two traumatic brain injury and acquired brain injury tend to present a little differently, and they might come in through different pathways, but harping back to the fact that whilst people may have similar deficits or impairments from their brain injury, they will be expressed in very different ways. So, and this is a good point to make, is that for many people in our community, their brain injury goes completely unrecognised. And like a mental health illness, it's not seen by the people that they're interacting with. So organisations like BIAT are doing a lot of work to try and help people communicate how they can best be supported in the community. And if we look at, a brain injury clearly can have a big impact on the way you think, can have a big impact on your memory, on your learning, on your problem solving. Tasks that used to come very naturally, like conversing around the dinner table or organising your school pickup and drop off, that you did without a thought prior to injury, can suddenly become incredibly overwhelming and difficult to manage, and people don't always understand that. And the cognitive fatigue can be hugely overwhelming. People will commonly describe a brain fog that comes and goes, and sometimes that's manageable and sometimes there's no trigger and no way to control. Discussing some of the physical impacts, I think people will be aware of, having seen stroke patients and TBI patients who have a hemiplegia or a limb that's not functioning the way it was previously, but we're also talking about things like altered sensation, smell and taste, which can be crippling for people and immensely frustrating. People will have issues with slurring of their speech because of the muscles in their mouth and ongoing headaches that are uncontrollable. The impact, I recently had an academic come through whose only impairment post-stroke was that her speech articulation wasn't up to scratch, and it was deeply affected her, because here's someone who used to be able to clearly articulate. She spoke at the university, she was an amazingly articulate woman, and all of a sudden every word is on the tip of her tongue, but she can't quite find it. And I think some of the communication deficits and difficulties with speech can be utterly profound. We find people with levels of changes behaviourally. They might become quite impulsive. They have trouble controlling themselves and controlling their impulses. For many patients, this is something that they're not aware of, that deeply impacts their family and friends. And for other patients, they're aware of it, and it's deeply embarrassing, and they have difficulty controlling it. And the emotional impacts, I guess what I see in the hospital is an awful lot of grief and loss as people try and struggle to deal with the new them, along with some issues with irritability and anger and ability to control their emotion in a way that they once did. And we know that depression and anxiety are overly represented post-traumatic brain injury. What's not on the slide that I think needs to be mentioned is that we also see resilience post-brain injury, and we see strength, and I find patients who report a purpose that they've now found that they would never have found without the brain injury, a gratitude and a humility that they now enjoy feeling that they wouldn't have felt previously. Ultimately, every brain injury is felt in a deeply human way, and I think the path to understanding probably doesn't lie in a list of key characteristics and impacts. It lies in an ability to demonstrate a deep empathy and a willing to listen to the person in front of you. And I think with that, we've got a... And this is a video taken from the massive online open course, which was developed by the Menzies Centre. And if anyone is looking for brain injury education, that's a fantastic way to do it.
Yeah, my name is Nicholas Rat Crouch. I've been called Rat since I was 2. We was over Queensland at the time. My father was over there shearing, and I think I might have played up a little bit and been called Rat ever since. I sustained my brain injury when I was out roo shooting with some mates. There was 3 of us walking through the scrub, and I was on the bottom side, and the bloke in the middle shot towards me. I happened to look up and I seen all these black dots coming. Didn't really know what they were at the time, and it struck me. And I didn't know anything really to that point onwards until I got to hospital, because I could move everything, talk fine, until I woke up 3 weeks later out of a induced coma. I really can't remember, but it was pretty daunting, I suppose you'd say. Not being able to do anything, like I had to learn how to walk, talk, because I still had my trachea here, so I couldn't talk when I first come out of my coma. I had to write things down. That's where things got really frustrated for me. It's because I couldn't do not very much. Just getting out of bed was a struggle for me. I was married with 2 kids, 3 years old and an 8-month-old, 2 girls. And I had a logging business with a family, mum and dad, brother, working long hours for a good future. And that all come down to a stop for me, and haven't been able to do it since. Been very hard. Brain injury has definitely suffered big time, and sort of people around me look at me and think, you can notice they look at you twice and think, is he alright? Or yeah, it's just something you'll never get over. Friendships, when I had this accident, I noticed who your true friends are, and now I've had a heap of support from my family, that's for sure. Wasn't from them, I don't know where I'd be. And when my pellet went through my brain, they said when it went through it ruined a lot of my pathways. I wish I took more notice of it back then. I would have really concentrated on my rehab a lot more. As I said, if you keep moving everything, your pathways will join up to it again. And it may have helped a lot sooner, I don't know. Yeah, when I go to the football and watch them play footy, I get frustrated because I can't go out there and, play as well. I can only sit on the boundary line, and I suppose to let my frustration out now, that's why I go to the gym. I know pushing my goals is a #1 thing for me at the moment, so going to the gym and physio is definite. I suppose one thing I have learnt in this journey so far is you don't sort of see your progress from day to day. It's sort of like probably every 6 months you look back and think, geez, I couldn't do that. And then you go another 6 months, yep, I can do that now. And that's a bit like going to the gym. I couldn't lift that amount of weight, but now I am. It's one hell of a journey, I suppose you'd say.
So, and I'm nearly finished. The last slide, and Simone asked me to put together a slide that describes pathways through the hospital. And I sent it through last week, and it's so verbose, I just ignore it. I think the reality is that every hospital in every region is going to have a different way through. This describes some of the pathways at the Royal Hobart, and I think loosely they're divided into trauma pathways, which typically we'd see our traumatic brain injuries travel through. That might involve ambulance TAS, that might involve the emergency department, and then a trauma team caring for them. Or we might see more surgical pathways where a patient presents through the emergency department and needs to go for neurosurgical procedure. Or it might describe a pathway where a GP picks up on an issue that then needs to come into hospital, and that may require surgery or it may require medical management. But the pathways that ABI patients traverse the hospital in is as diverse as the brain injuries themselves, and it's very difficult to suggest that a person will go any one way. It is important to note, and I mean, it perfectly described in Ratz's situation. You know, there used to be a rhetoric around recovery post-brain injury and getting X amount of recovery in 12 months or 2 years. And I think what we're learning now, and what science is telling us, is that the learning and the rehab can go on far beyond that. And every region is going to have rehabilitation teams at the end of that acute stay that can help work with people to get them back to the things that they love. And I'll answer some more questions around hospital pathways after, if anyone is interested. Otherwise, I'll hand back to Rosie.
Thank you very much, Lex. No, that was really, really interesting to hear more about brain injury and your kind of knowledge around all of that. So thank you. And if anyone's got any questions for Lex, people that are online, please just put them in the Q&A and we'll try and get to them at the end. So thank you. So my name's Rosie and I'm the Program Manager for the National Assistance Card. And following on from Lex's talk, I'm going to explain how the National Assistance Card, a personalised communication tool, can assist people with brain injury in the community. So I'd first like to give you a bit of background about the card. So the National Assistance Card was developed by the Brain Injury Association of Tasmania. The association provided an acquired brain injury identification card in Tasmania for about 20 years. And then we received a lot of interest from people across Australia. And following that, we were successful in securing funding from the Australian government to redevelop and roll the card out nationally. The card was renamed the National Assistance Card to focus more on the support someone may need rather than their diagnosis. So we've continued to work closely with lived experience advisory groups and community members to make sure the card is relevant and useful to card holders. So, as we've heard, brain injury can impact people in lots of different ways, including having difficulties with communication. The National Assistance Card can help give cardholders greater independence and more confidence in everyday social situations and provide peace of mind for families and carers. It can also help that community understanding of disability. Because the card's fully personalised, it helps people who are shown a card to learn more about brain injury or autism and helps them recognise that each cardholder's needs are unique to them. So the reason I mentioned autism just then was because the card is currently available nationally to both people with brain injury and autistic people. These two disabilities were chosen as the first eligible groups to fulfil a need. As we've heard already today in relation to brain injury, the impacts experienced are often not easily recognised and there can be poor community understanding. For example, someone with brain injury may have slurred speech and may be mistaken for being drunk. And autistic people may have communication needs such as situational mutism, and the card can help people explain. There's no age limit for the card, People need a diagnosis to get a card, so they need to provide a supporting document from a medical or allied health professional as part of the application. We hope in the future that the card will be available to people with all disabilities and health conditions. People who are not eligible at the moment can register their interest to evidence the need for expansion and to support future funding applications. So this is what the card looks like. Following consumer consultation, the card was designed and purpose-built online application was developed. People choose what to include on their card. So someone may choose to just show the front of the card, which asks for a bit of extra understanding and assistance. They may also choose to show the back of the card, which lists up to 5 impacts they might experience and a nominated contact person. And then what is kind of unique to the card is the personalised QR code. So when someone scans the QR code, it opens a personal profile that the cardholder has created, and people can choose to include as much or as little information on there as they want to, and it's all in their own words. So you can include a longer list of impacts, and then sort of more importantly, it's sort of what does this actually mean for you and how would you like to be supported? So someone with memory difficulties might sort of ask for things to be written down for them. People who have sensory difficulties may ask for meetings to be held in a quiet space. We've had someone write on their card, if I've shown you this card, sorry, I'm a very proud person. If I've shown you this card, it means that I really need your help, and please call my nominated contact person. And with the video, so you can add information in writing, but also as a video. And we've had different videos made. I mean, that's optional. We've had family members make videos for their children. We've also had people with speech difficulties introduce themselves, and then someone else has read their script on their behalf. And it's important to note, particularly around what Lex was saying around rehabilitation, that you can update the QR code at any time without getting a new card. So it means that as you progress through your rehabilitation or just through your life in general, you can change what you might want to share with people. So Paul is obviously here with us in person, and we will hear from him shortly, but Paul's also very kindly agreed to share his what he includes on his QR code on his card with us to give us an idea about the type of information that can be included.
Hello, my name's Paul Pritchard. I live with a brain injury and epilepsy. And what this means for me is that I'm just as intelligent as you. I just have memory and recall difficulties, but with a bit of patience, I usually remember the thread of what's going on. Sometimes, because I have a brain injury, people think I'm drunk. I'm slow to respond and I fall over quite often due to my hemiplegia. Consequently, I have trouble standing for long periods. I have word finding difficulties, especially when I'm tired. So if I have problems communicating, please just give me extra time to speak. And if I fall, it really hurts when people try and move me. So unless I'm in imminent danger or I'm already unconscious, then I should be able to get myself upright. I think what I would also like people to know is that when I have a seizure, I won't be able to remember things like what day it is or my children's name, my name, for about an hour. But I just need a couple of days rest. And finally, please just call my nominated contact person if I ask you to, or if it's a medical emergency. All right. Bye.
So thank you very much for your generosity in sharing your video, because it really just gives that idea of how personalised the information on the card can be. The card can basically be used in any way that the card holder wants. It can be used to request understanding or assistance, to communicate a need, like needing extra time to complete an activity, because people are feeling overwhelmed or confused, disorientated or unsafe. A survey has found that the most common places cardholders are using their card are in shops, at medical appointments, and when travelling or on public transport. So feedback from cardholders suggests that the card is proving to be a practical tool that can help with communicating needs, independence and confidence, and helping to prevent misunderstandings. For many, just having the card makes them feel more confident, having a backup should they need it. David explained that having the card is very helpful. I'm very conscious now that I'm not embarrassed to say, I have a brain injury and I can't understand you. Can you please speak slowly? It has given me confidence to ask people to slow down. Rachel also gives an example of that kind of community interaction that's impacted when I was recently admitted into my local hospital for 10 days. Upon arrival at the emergency department, I was unable to speak. The team was able to scan the QR code on my card and read that I'm a stroke survivor and may have difficulty communicating and understanding them. Because of this, the team was great in listening and taking care of me. And Georgia gives that example of family members and how the card can provide that peace of mind. The meaning of this card for my mother is the ability to have freedom. As carers, we are able to find that sense of not being so anxious when they leave the house. The card gives us the ability to not stress and wonder and call every 5 minutes because we have that confidence. So the card supports the recommendations from the Disability Royal Commission, Australia's Disability Strategy, and the National Autism Strategy of building a more inclusive Australia, helping service providers, businesses and the public better understand and support people with disability, changing attitudes and creating more inclusive spaces. It empowers cardholders and their families to self-advocate and actively shape their interactions with society rather than being treated as passive recipients. So in order to do that, community awareness of the card is really critical, and that in terms of people recognising the card and knowing how to respond. So promoting the National Assistance Card can improve customer service, support clients and create a more inclusive society. Getting feedback from places like Hobart Airport is really great. So the National Assistance Card service is a fantastic initiative to help our staff provide genuine and authentic support to our passengers. To support awareness, we've developed a digital library with information packs, videos, how to apply guides and an awareness badge. Services, businesses and individuals can share these resources through newsletters, social media, websites and hosting information sessions like this one, helping people to recognise the card, respond appropriately and know how to apply if they're eligible. All of the resources are available on our website, and we're working with businesses, government and services to raise awareness of the card, including developing resources for training staff. As part of that work, we've developed assistance, community assistance, how to respond brochures and videos that acknowledge that it's really important to acknowledge the card holder, not just read the card, and ask the card holder how you can assist them, be friendly and respectful. And if you're asked or needed, to scan that QR code to get a bit more information. So I won't go into how to apply in too much detail. It's an online application, and there are step-by-step guides both on our website and throughout the application. As mentioned before, you need a supporting document from a medical allied health professional. This doesn't need to go into detail, it just needs to confirm the disability. And the card costs $44, or a replacement card costs $22. This is only needed if you want to change what's printed on the card or if the card's lost. And as mentioned, people can update what's on the QR code at any time without getting a new card. We are able to waive the fee for anyone who's experiencing social or financial hardship. You just need to let us know when you complete the application. And some NDIS participants who are self or plan managed have successfully claimed the cost of the card from their plan. And cards have also been paid for by compensation insurers as well. We recommend asking a family member or service provider to help with the application, as this can be a great way to sort of talk through what's important to include on the card for you. And we've had feedback from allied health professionals who've assisted clients who say that applying for the card has been great as a sort of therapeutic process to identify communication needs and then end up with a functional tool. And as mentioned, we can do these online information sessions to increase that awareness. So I think now is a really good time now I've told you a bit about the card, to introduce Paul. So I'm really delighted to introduce Paul, who is an ambassador for the National Assistance Card, an acclaimed professional mountaineer, author and disability awareness educator. After sustaining a brain injury, Paul has continued to lead extraordinary adventures worldwide, from the Himalayas to the Larapinta Trail in the Northern Territory. Paul's film Larapinta End to End will be added to SBS On Demand from December this year, and he also has a TEDx talk on the dignity of risk, and I would highly recommend watching both. They're amazing. Today, Paul will talk a bit about his experience with the National Assistance Card. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Rosie. Please excuse me for reading from dot points, but I do have word finding problems and memory difficulties from a brain injury that I had in 1998 now. You see, a rock fell on my head from 25 meters when I was attempting to climb a rock formation known as the Totem Pole in Tasmania, on the Tasman Peninsula, actually. So if I get lost mid-sentence, just smile knowingly and it'll make us both feel better. I think that I'll start by telling you about a panel that I was recently on mountain tourism. I was sharing my thoughts about making trails more accessible, and halfway through a question from the moderator, a noise from the audience, and then a quick back and forth from the other panelists made it hard for me to process what I was being asked, that brain fog that you mentioned, Lex. And rather than push through, and risk misunderstanding, I took out my National Assistance Card and just discreetly showed it to her and to the moderator, because I was sat next to her, and she looked at it for a minute, and then she slowed her pace right down, and she rephrased the question more clearly. And just this small adjustment helped me to respond more thoughtfully and more confidently. And it also gave the audience a quiet example of how simple changes can make public spaces, including tourism events, more inclusive, and so therefore more equitable. That moment then became a real life demonstration of how we can make society more accessible. And actually it perfectly aligned with the very values that we were trying to promote on stage.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really sort of great sort of personal example of how the card can work. Are you able to share a bit more about how you use the card and how it supports you?
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing for me anyway about having the National Assistance Card is that if I have it in my wallet, it simply gives me confidence just knowing that someone might find it if I have a seizure or with my dodgy balance and slow speech. People, they often assume that I'm drunk, as I think you rightly said about many people with brain injury. And so if I'm challenged, it gives me the peace of mind just knowing that I've got it to hand, you know. So briefly, I carry my National Assistance Card to quickly explain my disability and needs in situations where communication might be difficult for me. And so it gives me the confidence and reduces misunderstandings. So I believe it ensures that I'm treated with dignity, because all people require dignity, right? And so, you know, not only non-disabled people. Added to this, I also use it as an educational tool in schools where I speak quite often, and I used it several times on the Larapinta Trail with rangers who they didn't believe that we could do it at first, and so this smoothed things over, and they even unlocked a couple of gates for us so that we could get the support vehicle closer to the trailhead.
So are there any other ways you see the card helping you in the future?
I think in the future, I think the card will just continue to support my independence and safety. And as more people and organisations become familiar with the card, it's sure to be recognised faster, and I'll be able to navigate public spaces and transport and events and unexpected situations more easily. And it'll also help me to connect with services and support workers without having to repeat my story again and again and again, which I quite enjoy doing, but not when I'm in a pickle.
Yeah. So how do you think the cards can help create a more accessible and inclusive community?
Well, I think that the card helps create a more inclusive community by increasing awareness and understanding of different needs. It gives people a quick and respectful way to offer the right help. So it reduces the barriers in everyday situations, and so I suppose it encourages empathy and acceptance. Of course, it's going to take a long time, but for the more people that recognise this card, it is bound to foster a culture where everyone feels safe and respected and included. And I think we're already seeing this from the uptake in numbers of people using the card, aren't we?
So how would you like people to respond when they're shown a national assistance card?
Well, I think when I show the card, I'd like people to respond with understanding and perhaps patience and respect. I hope that they take a little time to read the back of the card and follow the guidance that it gives. And I hope that they offer what help they can give without making any judgment or assumptions.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's been great hearing your kind of use of the card and thoughts on it all. So now we're kind of opening up to questions for all three of us. So there may be some questions in the room, or there may be some questions from online. I might hand back to Simone to work out what those questions are. But as was mentioned at the beginning, any questions we don't manage to get to, we've got everyone's details, so we'll be able to follow up after the session as well.
I have a couple of questions, and it looks like the first one's for Lex. What role does rehabilitation play in helping people rebuild independence, and what services are most valuable in that process?
Okay, and that sounds like a question, not just for me, but I'd be very interested to hear Paul's experience on that as well. I think that the point in difference between hospital care for brain injury and rehabilitation, I hope as a rehab practitioner, is that in a rehabilitation space, we're really working with the person towards their hopes and aspirations and goals. So we know that there's two aspects to rehabilitation. Part of it is the attempted restoration of function, and we try and start that process as early as possible, and that might be working on communication, or it might be working on physical function. But the other part of rehabilitation is helping someone adjust to the new them. It's helping them navigate the new world and work out the best ways that they can navigate them as the new person that they are. I don't know that there's any one most important aspect of rehabilitation, and I think that probably every person would point to a different moment where something has helped them in a most significant way. And I think if you don't mind, Paul, I'd be really interested on kind of how you feel about what was most important from a rehab point of view in your journey.
People that believed in me and didn't just shelve me, if you know what I mean. And I think just the knowledge that I'm still making recoveries 27 years later. So
it's so important.
Yeah. There's a really long-term thing. It's just your life. You just have to make it your life.
It goes from being rehabilitation to being life, doesn't it? And so that's a really, we talk in rehab a lot about SMART goals. And I think that clinicians often make the mistake of trying to judge what is going to be achievable for someone. And I actually don't think we often know. I don't think we know enough to put ceilings on what's possible in a rehabilitation space. And so many times I have patients come back to me 10 years down the track who were told they'd never walk again, or they'd never do the Larapinta Trail, or they'd never ride across the Himalaya, only to have achieved that down the track. So I think in rehab as well, we need to be really careful of not assessing what's possible.
Yeah, definitely.
We have another question here online. Has the card been used within the healthcare setting, in particular hospitals? So I guess that's open to anyone if they can think of an example.
Yeah, we've definitely had feedback, I guess like the one from before from Rachel, but we've had other feedback as well, that the card is being used in that setting, and we are working towards getting that recognition across Australia in all health settings. So it is taking time to do that, but we're working. We had meetings recently with someone from New South Wales Health, and we're working with Queensland Health as well, and Tasmania Health, and gradually we're kind of rolling out that awareness. And it is definitely a work in progress. But yeah, that is a space where the card is being used. I might get you to click forward on the slides as well, because I can't seem to do that anymore. But yeah, does that answer the question?
It does, yes. We have another question. How has the National Assistance Card Program been working with businesses and services to raise awareness so staff know how to respond when someone shows them their card?
Well, I guess that sort of follows on a little bit from the last question. Yes. We're actively working with people and to raise awareness and encourage that recognition. We have recently done some work with Woolworths Group, and information about the card is going to be embedded into their staff training package, and we hope to, once we've sort of set that up, to then replicate that across some other national retailers as well. We are speaking with councils, and we're also working with emergency services. Sometimes our capacity, as we're a very small team, takes a while for these things to roll out, but we've recently updated our website with a page for emergency services, and we've got a meeting scheduled with, for example, New South Wales SES in September. So again, it's gradually getting that word out there. We provide, when cardholders are sent the card, they're also sent some of the brochures around that recognition of the card, and they're encouraged to sort of give those brochures out to services that they use as well. So yeah.
Great. And this is a question for you, Paul. How has your brain injury impacted you?
Well, you know, I was in hospital for a year, and like the fellow rat, I think in the video, I had to learn to walk and talk again over the course of a year, and it was really quite life-changing, obviously. But do you know what? After 27 years of constant struggle, I think I'd call it. It's like, I think it's like mind training, and so I now realise that it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I know that not everyone might not be able to say this, but it's just taught me so much about determination and patience, because you know when you fall over for the third time that week or something, and you know, and you have to just get yourself back up again, and so I think that how I've been able to turn it around is that I see the struggle that everyone's got is struggling to some extent in some form, and so I think it's increased my compassion as well. And I think it's something, and it's interesting what you were saying, Lex. I mean, is that a common story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to say that who's going to feel like that. And I never, you know, when I meet people early on in the hospital, it's very difficult to know who's going to find themselves within the injury and who isn't. I don't know what those factors are, but I think it's there are so many people who, like you, would describe it as a moment in time that help them really focus in on who they are and help them become a better person.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we may be running out of time, but I reckon we can maybe have at least one more
Were
question.
there any questions in the room, I guess, as well? I don't know if you have questions, but...
Yeah, I've got a question. Thank you all for an amazing, informative presentation. This is a question about the interface between services for people who have sustained, excuse me, a brain injury. So as people move through the hospital rehabilitation system and move on in their journey of recovery, just wondering if maybe Lex and maybe the other two panelists can talk a little about how the different services and the tools available for people sort of couple with that rehab journey and the potential for greater connection and cohesion with supporting people with a sense of the continuation of rehab and recovery moving much, much, much further into the future than what we have traditionally recognised.
Wants to kick off? Do you want me to start? I think it's a massive challenge. I think that, and I don't know what Paul's experience was moving from acute to rehab spaces and indeed international rehab spaces. But I think we have a ton of work to do. I think we're poor at taking someone's story and journey and passing that on without them having to repeat that ad nauseum. I think there are a lot of us trying to do lots of work around how that person's goals and aspirations are identified early and carry on from one service all the way through to the community. And it's a real challenge delivering it in the resource environment that we're in at the moment. But I think we're making steps, but they're not as many as I'd like.
I don't know. For me, I think there's some holes, but I think that I've had absolutely bomber occupational therapy and physiotherapy anyway in Australia. It's just been incredible and it's still ongoing after 27 years later.
Thank you.
Excellent. And look, I think unless there's any quick questions, I think we're out of time, everyone, and we might need to say thank you all for joining us online, and thank you to our panelists. It was really informative to have you all here, and we're very grateful for that. I know we still have some questions online, so if that's the case, they'll be followed up and sent in an email afterwards. But we'd just like to thank you all for joining us, and we'll be ending the session.